coding. After completing the design phase, we have to move for coding. We have to move for coding of the system, of the actual implementation of the software. And in that case, all the module specification and the data structure, algorithm of each of the module that are already specified into some structure chart, into some data DFT or some detailed design, etc. And that we have to implement in this coding phase. That's why there is another name of this phase, that is implementation. Implementation phase or coding phase. Now, the objective of this coding phase is to transfer the design of a system and given by the module in the specification or in the previous module, and we have to transfer those specification into some high level language code, and then not only to transfer the code, as well as we have to test, that is called unit testing of the program. So coding means not only coding, along with coding the unit test will be done parallelly when the software engineers will code the program. Normally good development organizations require their programmers to some well defined and standard style of coding, but coding standards, there are some coding standards or guidelines which we should follow when which should follow everyone when they are going to code something. A coding standard actually gives you some uniform appearance of the codes written by different engineers, and it provides sound understanding of the code. It encourages good programming practices. So first is coding standards and guidelines. Number one, we will list some general coding standards and guidelines, and that may be adopted by the software development organization or the developers. So first one is the representative coding standards. What are the coding standards? Uh, First is the rules for limiting the use of globals. Rules for limiting use of globals. These rules actually list what type of data can be declared globally and what cannot. There are some data items or some variables which is necessary, really necessary when you are going to develop the software to declare in the globally, but limit the use of global variables. And when you are using a global variables, there are so many functions may change in these global variables, may access these global variables, and if in any case these global variables by chance has to be changed, so that is a very problem to find out this actual function which changes this global variable. That's why you should limitize the use of global variables. The next point is contents of the headers preceding code for different modules. That is, write the headers. In simple, we can say write the headers for every module. Okay, every module. In this header, you should write the name of the module, the date of the module, the author name, the modification history if something is modified, the synopsis of the module, uh, the different functions supported along with module, and the IO along with IO informations of those functions. Then the global variable which are accessed through this module, access or modified into this module. And these are the some important ideas which you should follow to write above the header, to prepare the header of each and every module. If you write this, then you can easily find out that which module is on which purpose and who create this, when create this, what are the modification has been made into this module, which global variables and which functions are accessing this by this module. Okay, next one is naming conventions. You should follow your own naming convention. Like for global variable, local variable, or constant variable, etc. For example, if this is a global variable, we may use NAME. If it is a local variable, we may use NAME. If it is a constant variable, we may use NAME. So by looking the name of the variable, we can easily understand that this is a constant variable, this is a local variable, this is a global variable. So this type of accessibility or constraint you should follow into when you are writing the code. Next হলো error return convention and exception handling. That means when you are returning an error or an exception, you may follow two value, 0 or 1. Sometimes you may follow 0 for true and 1 for false, and sometimes you may follow 0 for false and 1 for true. So when you are doing this type of modules, when multiple employers doing this type of modules, so it is a very problem that which module returns which 0 for false and which module returns 0 for true, to keep in mind. So you should follow a general rules that either you should follow 0 for true and 1 for false, or you should follow 0 for false and 1 for true for the whole project, not only single module. And this normally comes from the company rules. Company normally decides that we should follow this. And there are some representative coding guidelines. The guidelines says, the first one is Do not use the coding style that is too clever or too difficult to understand. Do not use too difficult coding idea. Okay, that means suppose I have a simple Fibonacci series, or I have a simple factorial. For that factorial, we may use a for loop or while loop or any other loop, or we may use recursion. So recursion is too clever to understand or too complex to understand. That's why we should avoid recursion in case of this type of programming language. So normally you should write a for loops. It may be for loop, maybe while loop, or any other thing. Do not use any complex ideas into your program. Your program or module should be each and every time easy structure, easy algorithm, easy idea should be used. Why? Because when after some times when it is necessary to modification your code, at that time it should be easily understandable, and if it is easily understandable, it is easily modifiable, and it is and it is easily modifiable, and obviously it you can easily understand the code very fast, and when you do it fast, your work will be done fast. The next point is avoid obscure side effect. The obscure side effect means it is not obvious from a casual examination of the code. That means if you do the code in casually examine the code casually, then it is not done. Obscure side effects makes it difficult to understand a piece of code. For example, if global variable is changed obscurely anywhere into your program, and if which is difficult to infer from the functions name and header of the information, it is become difficult to understand the code also. So that's why this type of global variable do not change anywhere into your program obscurely. Next is do not use an identifier for multiple purpose. Do not use same identifier for multiple purpose. So there are so many loops. For example, a for loop, and after completing this for loop, there is another while loop. After completing this while loop, you should return a value. You are using here I. Here the same I may be used. Here the same I may be used. Do not do this. You should create different identifier for different purpose. Programmers often use the same identifier to denote several temporary entities, which is used short memory location. Obviously, if you use a single variable, this memory location will be very short. But if the programmer use multiple variables, then the memory location becomes high. Obviously, if we use multiple location, the memory location should be high. Some of the problem maybe arise for this. If we use the single variable, then each variable should be given to a descriptive name. You should give the descriptive name with the variable, that what in which purpose this variable is used, and this is not possible of an identifier is used for multiple purpose, and use of the variable for multiple purpose can lead to confusion and make it difficult for somebody trying to read and understand the code. Okay, use of variable for multiple purpose usually makes the further enhancement of the difficulties. That's why you should, when you are creating the variable, you are giving the name of the variable with the purpose of the variable, and if you use that variable multiple times, the purpose may not be matched, and that time there is a very confusion for the modifier that in which actual purpose the variable is used. So avoid this type of problems. Next, the code should be well documented. As a rule of thumb, there should be at least one comment line on average for every 3 source lines. There should be one comment line for every 3 source line. This is the rule of thumb. So you should follow this rule of thumb rules, and uh, you should follow, write the at least comment, at least 3 lines of code, at least one comment you should write here into your code. So each and every time when you are writing code, you should write the comment also. That is the purpose of the code, what is the run into this statement, etc. The length of any function should not exceed 10 source line. The length of any function should not exceed 10 source code. Any function, not any module. All the functions of the module should not exceed 10 source code. Okay. Next, do not use goto statement. Obviously, you should avoid goto statement. When you are using goto statement, then it makes your program unstructured and it should be very difficult to understand. So these were some coding guidelines of when a programmer will do the coding. Next, there is a term code review. You have completed the coding, and this code review for a module is carried out after the module is successfully compiled and all the system error, syntax error eliminated, and then the code reviews are code reviews are extremely cost effective strategy for reduction of coding errors in order to produce high quality code. That means you have written some codes. After writing the codes, you have tested that your code is running or not, and then this code review happens. There are two types of review strategy. First one is code walkthrough, and code inspection. Code walkthrough is an informal code analysis technique. Some members of the development team are given the code for a few days before a walkthrough meeting happened. The members read and understand the code. Then each member selects some test cases and simulates the execution of the code in hand. Clear? So first ki hoche, those codes are given to some members of the development team. The members, before few days of the walkthrough meeting, they test, read and understand the code, and each member selects some test cases and simulates the program is running successfully or not, but they are doing this by hand. The main objectives of the code walkthrough are to discover the algorithmic and logical errors, not the syntactic error. To find out algorithmic and logical error, not the syntactical error. The members note down their findings to discuss these into the walkthrough meeting, where the coder of the module is also present. The actual coder of the module is also present when the walkthrough meeting is going on. So there are some guidelines in the code walkthrough meetings. The first one is the team performing the code walkthrough should not be either too big or too small. Ideally, 3 to 7 members are happening into this team. For a module, when the code walkthrough meeting is or code walkthrough test review is going on, the member should not be more than 3 to 7 members. This team should be too small. The next is discussion should focus on discovery of errors and not how to fix the discovered errors. Here, all the discussion should be going on what are the errors happens, not how to fix the errors. Okay, this type of errors happens, this type of error happens. This will be only the discussing area in this meeting, not how to fix it. Next, in order to in order to encourage the cooperation and to avoid the feeling among the engineers that they are being evaluated in the code walkthrough meeting, the manager should not attend the walkthrough meeting. Okay, the engineers may think that they are being evaluated through this meeting, and manager will take some necessary steps on the working condition of this meeting. So to avoid this, the manager should not attend this code walkthrough meetings. So these were some guidelines of code walkthrough. Now the code inspection. The aim of code inspection is to discover some common types of errors caused due to oversight and improper programming. Okay, some common types of errors. During code inspection, the code is examined for the presence of certain kinds of errors. In contrast to the hand simulation of code in code walkthroughs. For example, consider the classical error of writing a procedure that modifies a formal parameters while calling routing calls and procedure will constant actual parameters. Suppose you are sending a you are writing a loop function, and into this function you are using pointer and the actual value is being changed into this function, but therefore the actual value should not be changed should maybe wrongly changed into your function. So this type of inspection is to be done into the code inspection. The detecting of common errors adherence the code standards also checked out the code inspection. The coding standards also checked out during this code inspection. That means what are the standard of your coding? Standard means you are writing the perfect variable name or not, you are giving the array indices, your array are going out of bound or not. In C programming, you know that when your array is going out of bound, then there is no error. This type of common errors are to be checked into this code inspection. there are so many errors are checked. First one, you may know that use of uninitialized variable. You didn't initialize a variable, but you are using that the variable should be initialized as it is. So that's type of common errors may be found here. Jumps into loops. When you are jumping from one loops to another loops, there may be some value problems, and this type of errors are found it. Non-terminating loops. Suppose you are using a loop, but in some case that loops may not be terminated perfectly. That type of errors are found here. Incompatibly assignments. You are assigning a variable value which is not compatible with your variable. That suppose you are assigning a float value into a integer value. The program will run, but normally you may not be available. You may not be aware about what the value is. It is actual value. It is, or sometimes you are using a floating value, but after 5 or 6 digit there should be a 1, 2 or any other value, and that value will not be stored normally into your float value variable. In that case you have to adjust those value into some other way. Array indices out of bound, we have discussed this. Improper storage allocation and deallocation. Your storage allocation, you are allocated so many storage, but you didn't deallocate your storage after using it. So that those storage are to be maybe useful for some other program or some other variables. So that is another type of error. Mismatch between actual and formal parameter in procedural call. When you are calling a procedural function, there's this type of mismatch also happen, that formal parameters and the procedural and the actual parameters are not actually matched with their types. So these type of errors are done into the code inspection. Then there is another testing is done by some companies like IBM. IBM pioneered this type of testing that is called clean room testing. This is pioneered by IBM. In clean room testing, the type of testing relies heavily on walkthrough, inspection, and formal verification. The programmers are not allowed to test any other code by executing the code, other than doing some syntax testing using a compiler. Only the programmer do some syntax testing using a compiler. All the testing techniques are done by hand. This type of testing technique of normally procedure, documentation, and code in more reliable and maintainable than the obtained from other development methods, which rely heavily on code execution based testing. The main problem of this approach is that the testing effort is increased because walkthrough, inspection, and verification are time consuming. Both are time consuming, and both after this the clean room testing is done. In the clean room testing, what they do, they only made the testing through the in in hard copies by hand, not in the by running the software also. That's why this type of testing